So thank you all for joining us. I'm Callum. I'm the Sport Welfare Officer for Get Berkshire Active. I'm joined by Heidi from Oxfordshire and Sarah from Hampshire this evening. I'm hoping you're all familiar with everyone. We work as a bit of a cluster and delivering these sessions and trying to cover different topics. So the subject for this evening is create safer sport, primarily focusing on supporter behaviour. So we have adapted this session from uh, where we had a train the trainer session with an organization called Freedom Personal Safety, who helped us develop slides, and also myself and Heidi delivered uh, a sexual harassment kind of female harassment session last week for organizations. So some of the content is relevant to that, but we've also edited it to make it more relevant to supporter behavior. So I'll go through that in more detail as we go through, but there'll be some reference to sort of female harassment and things like that. So if anyone maybe feels uncomfortable about that, feel free to, make yourself scarce for a minute. There's nothing particularly overly triggering, but if obviously it's a topic that some people may be affected by, so please just look after yourself and be aware of that. So to start us off, if you wouldn't mind getting either your phone out or joining our Slido using that code on the screen there. If you can get your phone out and scan the QR code and answer the question that we have at the top of what do you hope to get out of this session? So there's no right or wrong answers here, just to sort of see that everyone's engaged and what they're hoping to get out of the session. So please do pop anything in there that you might want to. It could be how to deal with difficult supporters or how to deal with difficult participants, anything like that. Please do pop that in the information. I'll give everyone a second to do that now. Perfect. So I've got some answers coming through already. To be able to support my club, some helpful information, education, better understanding of difficult participants, understanding what we need from me when struggling. That's a great point. Advice and ideas for support, dealing with others, dealing with volunteers. Thank you all very much. Still see more people are typing. How to deal and help with our young gymnasts and coaches. Unable to join the session last week, so here to learn. Perfect. Thank you very much, whoever that was. As I say, this is a very similar session to the session we delivered last week. Some of the examples are slightly different, but it's the same core principles. So we're very pleased to have you with us. More insight on how to deal with things effectively, help and support clubs and signpost to resources, and help support the clubs in my league. Perfect. I think that as everyone has stopped typing now, as far as I can see, according to my screen. So thank you very much for that. We will move on. One more quick question in exactly the same manner. What's currently stopping you from intervening when you witness something that doesn't seem right? So I think there's a lot of us often see things and think, I'm not pleased with that, doesn't seem right, but I'm not quite sure what to do. So maybe if people want to answer that question using the same platform, that would be very helpful. Yeah, so we've already got people typing, not knowing how to. Perfect. That was certainly my situation before I started going through the process of this training. I didn't really know how to deal with it, and we'll come on to that later on, how the different techniques you can use. Safety, perfect. That's one of our points as well, is you always have to make sure you're safe as well. There's no point putting yourself in danger and making an issue out of it, even more putting yourself in danger. Unsure of how to deal with it, not knowing how to deal with it, don't want to say the wrong thing, not having the confidence, people reacting badly. That's a very good point. So we'll have some techniques around that as well. Don't want to be wrong, how to do it safely, wary of making things worse. These are all fantastic points and sort of thing we will come on to later on with the different techniques that we can provide, rather than simply confronting the issue head on, which, as a lot of you have mentioned, can sometimes make it worse. Identifying what seems right. So yeah, it's similar to having the confidence, like, you start doubting yourself, don't you? Is this right? Is this not right? Why is no one else doing anything? So it definitely can play on our minds a lot. I think we'll just give it one more second if anyone else pops up with anything else. I'm here from a domestic abuse point of view. Um, Sorry, let me just move my camera. Uh, so don't want to intervene due to thinking it's a domestic. Okay, yeah, I understand that you might not want to. You might not think it's your place to intervene with someone else's, relationship or dynamic. Completely understand that. And again, there's some other techniques that could be relevant to that
Yeah, thanks.
afterwards. If everyone wouldn't mind just making sure they're on mute. I'm just hearing a bit of background noise. So no worries if that was you, but if you wouldn't mind just popping on mute, that just helps everyone hear better. Perfect. Right, so I can see that everyone's stopped typing now, so I will move on. So what we'll explore today is what it really means to be an active bystander and what that actually means, because it's a term that you hear sometimes these days, but I certainly, when I first heard it, I had no idea what it actually meant. So hopefully we'll try and cover that today. And we'll also sort of go over why stepping in, even in small ways, matters. I know certainly myself, sometimes I used to think, oh, if I intervene, it's not going to make any difference in the long term. What does one person doing something have on the effect of the whole community? But we'll show you hopefully why we feel that doing small things can actually make big changes in our society. Staying curious rather than judgmental. So someone mentioned in the Slido around, not wanting to get involved in case they think it's, a domestic argument amongst partners, for example. And that's why it's around being curious rather than just instantly judging people and sort of criticizing them. It's sort of thinking, I wonder what's going on here. Let's see if we can understand some of the underlying reasons. Oh, and then the main thing we'll have is practical tools and examples. So I think certainly from myself in the past, I've felt very much like you see something's wrong, but you don't really know what you can do about it. So these are the things that you can actually do to support other people. Different actions for different comfort levels and how safe you feel. So again, not wanting to put yourself in danger or not having the confidence to deal with anything major. There's ways you can intervene without actually directly confronting the individual. And as I've mentioned previously, this is a safe space, and there may be one or two scenarios that could be a little bit triggering. As I said, we've taken out most of the content around sort of sexual harassment and that sort of thing, but there is still references to it in our presentation. So please do look after yourself. I've also added a couple of links there. So from the domestic abuse sort of sexual harassment element, there's an organization called Our Streets Now who we've worked quite closely with. They've got some great resources on there. And then from a sort of sports spectator behavior point of view, I've put a link there to a section of the NSPCC website. So they have a section, they have a sort of subunit of the NSPCC called the CPSU, which is the Child Protection in Sport Unit. They have a lot of resources around children's sport and how to keep them safe. So that's another resource that people can tap into if they want to look at some more information. So just a couple of statistics over sort of to get an understanding of what the problem is. A lot of people might think, oh, does this stuff still happen anymore? And unfortunately, it does. I did some research and found some quite recent studies and statistics on the issue. So, for example, Kick It Out. So, for those of you that aren't aware, is a anti-racism campaigning group that focus predominantly in football. And they did a survey in the 24-25 season, the football season, and found that there was 1,398 discrimination reports and that was the highest ever they've received. So there is clearly still a big problem. The only caveat I would add is that obviously these days more people are reporting these things. So please don't get too sort of depressed about the situation of sport. There are still obviously a lot of great things about sport, but there are clearly issues as well. And one of the reasons that may be that people are reporting these things more because they feel more comfortable reporting it. But clearly you can see across the season there was a lot of issues. Another study by FIFA Pro, so FIFA is the World Football Organization and it's their professional athlete body, found that 76% of national players' unions, such as the FA or the Football Association, have growing concerns about player workplace safety due to supporter violence. So that's obviously at the elite level, but that's shows that they have quite a high percentage there are having an increased concern. So not just the normal concern. They're worried that things might be getting worse. And obviously, I imagine we're speaking to predominantly sort of grassroots sports organisations today. But as we all know, particularly sort of kids, what they see players and athletes doing on TV, they have a tendency to replicate. And similarly, it was with supporters as well. And a lot of these stats come from football, which is unfortunately somewhere we do often see poor behaviour. And then in another study I found from last year, this was in grassroots football, which was the only study I could find about grassroots football. Unfortunately, most of it was focused on national level stuff, but negative behaviour was identified to make up approximately 35 to 40% of total behaviour, with competitive football being identified worse. So worse than other sports. Sorry, my camera. I've got everyone's pictures on the side of my screen there, so I couldn't quite see the end of the sentence. So yeah, as I said, football, quite often does get the brunt of this kind of behaviour, but it's not exclusive to football. So hopefully we can sort of come up with some techniques around that. And then finally, this stat was actually from our sort of women's safety session that we did, but I thought it was still quite useful to this session. 1 in 5 female coaches experience harassment, and usually from other coaches, which is quite disappointing, I think. So it's not just players and supporters that can face issues. It's also staff working, coaches, volunteers, people giving up their Saturday mornings for your kids' football team or whatever, and they're still getting abuse from that as well. So there's clearly an issue. I'm assuming the fact that you've all attended tonight is you're all aware that there is an issue, and you've very proactively come on to try and support that issue. So thank you very much for doing that. My slide not changing. Perfect. Here we go. So again, this image came from our sexual harassment, female violence session, and it's from the organisation I mentioned called Our Streets Now, and it talks around the sort of pyramid diagram they've got there of the smaller issues, or so-called perceived smaller issues, at the bottom of the pyramid there in the wider dark blue. People just sort of making small comments and little unwanted things that maybe might seem like not a huge deal, but if left unchallenged, the theory is that that behavior can potentially escalate up to sexual harassment in the middle section, and then ultimately quite severe sexual assault at the top. And I kept that in because I thought it was quite a good visual, because it's the same sort of theory you can get with spectator behavior. So, for example, if someone is behaving poorly on the sidelines and nobody does anything about it, they might then have the confidence to start escalating and doing more. And in theory, you could end up with incidences around individuals, assaulting people and stuff. And unfortunately, it does happen. We do hear stories of grassroots football matches and things like that where people are literally assaulting each other and having to be separated. So unfortunately, it does happen. And our hope is that if we can try and change that culture early on and call people out, or create a better culture where that's not acceptable, then the more serious things don't happen further down the line. So I'm just going to start off with a video here from the NSPCC CPSU unit, and it's just quite a useful visual from, they spoke to some kids about how it feels when their parents are either supporting them or when they're getting negative feedback from other people. So I'll just play this for you, and then if I could have a thumbs up if we've got the sound, just to double check.
Who do you think they said was their biggest fan?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Well, what I like most about dance is obviously dancing. I just feel like nobody's judging, nobody cares, and I just feel free from everything, and I'm in my own little world.
Probably the competitions, because they're really good fun.
Like winning medals or even coming last is still fun, because you went out to the competition and you tried your best.
What's the best thing about having your parents support you?
Makes me feel really happy and warm inside. Like I could do anything and really confident.
If I have a really good or really bad piece, I'll look over in the crowd and I'll just see her smiling no matter what.
It feels important to teach children that actually being present is the important thing. taking part is the important thing. If you lose, it's just something to improve on, and that's okay.
If a child or person hears their kind of name getting called out in a good way, it helps them do a little better. They know they've got someone there to perform for. But then obviously when you've got the bad ones, it kind of has the opposite effect.
When they're saying something horrible about me, it just makes me feel sad.
When parents sort of say things that could be quite negative, it can really feel like quite a toxic thing to pass on to their children as well.
And it can be devastating, and you could lose a potential Olympic champion.
It's not good spirit, and it's this negative energy that I don't like to be around.
You get hugs or anything if it's been a rough one?
You usually get a hug, don't you? Yeah. Sometimes we get a little treat. But it's great to really sort of talk to her about the game afterwards in the car, and really encouraging sort of thinking about those good bits. So even if they do lose, like, what was the good bit about it? What did they do really well? You know, where have they played together really well, and how they made each other feel as well.
Do you think you'd be able to spot a negative or abusive coach?
Yeah, I think so. I would see the signs with him not wanting to go to classes, not wanting to leave his room potentially, and his whole positive vibe on dance classes changing.
Who do you think Sean said was his biggest fan?
Me. I think Sean said that I was his biggest fan.
Sean, what'd you say?
Mum. I said mum. Exactly that.
Isabel's biggest fan is her little sister. There are rules in the arena that you are not meant to shout and cheer, but you can't tell a very cute 5-year-old off for that.
Was it me?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
How do you know Mom's your biggest fan?
Because she does all the hard work for me every single day.
She's always there. She's just always there supporting me.
Always smiling and like being loud and cheering after a good throw.
Yeah, I do shout after good throw, sorry.
Knowing that there's someone there to push you further and encourage you to carry on doing what you're doing.
I want to thank you, Mum, for working very hard for me, for my sister and for my dad.
Thanks for always being supportive and there for me.
I just love everything about sport. I think it helps kids in all walks of life.
I can tell he loves it. It brings us together. It's something we can all talk about, something we can all get involved in. It just makes me smile.
Sorry about that. I was having some difficulty changing the slide. Perfect. Here we go. So yeah, just a useful video there that I felt we could include. It's more obviously focused slightly more on sort of parental support, but I think it shows that positivity around sort of supporting rather than that sort of poor behavior, and also the impact poor behavior can have on young people. So I just wanted to go over a few definitions of sort of what the sort of content we'll be covering today. So for example, we've got harassment there. So that's unwanted conduct related to a relevant protected characteristic, which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. And that's from the government's website. So obviously, you know, creating intimidating, hostile atmospheres does unfortunately happen sometimes at sport. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, you know, play on home advantage and things like that, but there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. So that's when it would come under harassment. Similarly, the definition for bullying is repetitive, intentional hurting of one person or a group by another person or group, where the relationship involves an imbalance of power. It can be physical, verbal, or psychological. Psychological, I think, is often one of the ones that people miss out and forget about. But unfortunately, it can be very damaging towards people, particularly when the imbalance of power comes in. So that could be something like a coach or a volunteer or manager, you know, picking on certain individuals or certain players, and singling them out. That would come under the definition for bullying. And then banter, which is something that people often try and use as an excuse to pass off poor behavior, or it's just banter. And that's a playful and friendly exchange of teasing remarks. So friendly and playful being the theme there, and we'll come on to the next slide, which talks about the different types of banter. Because as I say, when quite often people's first response to, oh, you know, maybe that's not the right way to behave, is to sort of go, oh, it's just banter. And you can see from our slide here that there's different types of banter. So inclusion versus exclusion. So sort of proper banter, so to speak, is close friendships. It's light-hearted. It's involving people that want to be involved in it, and it's a sort of two-way thing, and it's light-hearted. And also the flip side of that is there's the exclusion side of it. So it's, you know, one-sided. There's an imbalance of power. It's focusing on someone's identity or maybe their differences or their protected characteristics. And it generally is a one-way street where someone's basically saying unpleasant things to someone, and trying to just pass it off as banter, even though they're actually being, you know, offensive and intentionally causing offense to that person. So we have another video here that sort of goes on to explain about what a bystander is, and then also the different type of what an active bystander is that we'll come on to on the next slide. So again, this is just quite an interesting video to see how people behave when something's not right, and then also what happens when somebody does intervene. So we'll have a watch of this, and then we will discuss it afterwards.
Place like this street in New York City, if you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help! Help!
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help! Help me, sir. Please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help. And it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You all right? You all right?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up?
She don't look well, does she?
You all right? Yeah. Sure.
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm all right.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
Why you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group. Everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past. So I'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
So I think that's a really interesting video, and it shows that it talks about the fact that, you know, if nobody intervenes, everybody else watches that and thinks, oh, I don't need to intervene either. And vice versa, if you're that brave person that starts and intervenes, more often than not, people will come and support you. So hopefully, in the second part of this session, we can help give you some techniques to be that good Samaritan. And it is interesting to see how different people relate to different people as well, from the perception. When the guy's in his suit, more people are interested to help. So it definitely shows how people relate to the individual as well. Yes, Sophie, I can see you've got your hand up. Did you have a question? Feel free to either unmute yourself or pop it in the chat.
Yeah, are we allowed to kind of ask questions?
We can do. We'll probably do questions at the end, but feel free now.
Well, it was just in relation to that video quickly. So I'm the domestic abuse person that's kind of piggybacking on this session. But I remember there was a video where they did an experiment of a domestic happening in public. And one was where the female was being kind of assaulted. And then they did another one vice versa, just to see who would intervene. And I think kind of people were laughing when it was a male being assaulted by a female. And then the other way around, people did tend to intervene. It was still a bit kind of hesitant. But yeah, I think kind of for my setting, that's sometimes where people feel unsure about intervening as well.
Definitely, and that's a great point about perception. Is, when we see certain things happening, we kind of think, "Oh, that's definitely not right." But then when you say, as you say, if it's a male victim, I think I've seen the same video. People are sort of thinking, "Well, that's okay," and there's obviously it's not in either case. So yeah, no, that's a really good point around building on that perception of how people see other people. So we're just going to go through now briefly what some barriers are. A lot of you already mentioned this in the Slido, so you were already a bit ahead of the curve there. But there's obviously some barriers that people, are worried about escalating a situation. So if you intervene when someone's shouting and screaming, the chances are they're going to continue shouting and screaming even louder at you. And we completely get that. And people might be scared, intimidated. I think somebody mentioned in the question at the start is, questioning whether they think it's right or wrong. You start to doubt yourself. They might be embarrassed, not know how to intervene. They're worried about the relationship impact. So it could be if it's someone you know quite well and you're saying, I'm not sure that's okay. You're worried about the friendship or the dynamic between the two of you. Also, it happens all the time. So that's something that, you see in like football, for example. A lot of people almost just expect that kind of volatile behavior. And obviously we're trying to sort of change that, particularly in the sort of grassroots level. People might think it's not that serious. So again, if you think back to the image I showed you of the pyramid, people might think, oh, well, it's not the worst thing in the world, so I'll leave it. But that unfortunately can lead to more things going wrong in the future. And learnt helplessness. So similarly, nobody else is doing anything, so I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing. It's not my problem. That's something we see a lot of in today's society, unfortunately. And then again, as we've come across, how people identify and relate to the person being targeted. So people are more likely to support someone if they look or think like them rather than someone that doesn't. So then that comes on to sort of active bystandership. So as we saw in the video, the people in the first part of the video that were just walking past, they were just very much bystanders. They weren't doing anything. And when people did intervene, they became active bystanders. So that's when you recognize that something's wrong or somebody's being targeted and acting on that rather than just observing. And being an ally towards those people and getting others involved. When Heidi comes onto her section shortly, she'll go over what we call calling on, calling in, and calling out. So you can ask people to support you. And also things like reporting. So if you don't feel comfortable it's directly intervening, you can report or document what's happened so that you might have some evidence against that individual, and similarly supporting. So even after the incident has happened, you can go up and check on someone to make sure they're okay. And as I say, Heidi will come across that. We'll cover that in the second part of the presentation. And as with everything, make sure you're safe first, as somebody else already mentioned in the Slido. And please don't do anything that puts yourself in danger. So why is this important? As we mentioned, we're trying to sort of change the culture. Those of you that are familiar with the Sport Welfare Officer network that we all work in, one of our remits is to try and change a culture. It's obviously a much harder thing to do than it is to say, but it's around making sport that positive, welcoming environment. And unfortunately, as you know, sometimes it can not be that. So that's what we're trying to do. It's important for people's health and well-being. So if people are not getting active and they're not feeling welcome, they're not going to engage in these things. And similarly, it's the law. So actually, a lot of this stuff is illegal, harassment and bullying in certain situations, and we're sort of obliged to make sure people are protected. And also just so that people feel safe and supported, and they're more likely to, enjoy the sessions. And obviously, I assume most of us on the session tonight, enjoy sport and physical activity and see the benefits of it. And obviously, we want to make that fun for everyone and try and expand our reach and get other people to enjoy what we have been able to enjoy in these environments. Right, so now we will come on to Heidi's section. So Heidi is going to take over and cover what we call the 5Ds, which is the really useful practical steps that you can actually do if you witness something. So I will pass over to Heidi, and as I say, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we can cover them at the end. So over to you, Heidi.
Am I going to try and take control?
Yes, you can. Right, I have given you control. That should work now.
It's not offering me an option to turn the slides.
That's strange. I wonder if I come out of sharing and then you start sharing, if that works. I did give you control, but it's not working for some reason. So let me sharing. And then do you have the slides up, Heidi?
Yeah, one sec.
Perfect. So if you start sharing, then that should give you control.
IT is not our main area of expertise, is it, Callum?
Well, as we said in the last session, this worked perfectly when we did a practice, and then when it came to the actual session, it didn't work. So we're having the same situation again tonight.
How does that look for everyone? Can anyone see anything?
So we can see the first slide from where I started. So if you move on, then yeah, I can see that now.
Scoot along. So I've got everyone poised, poised to find out what the 5Ds are all about. Okay, how does that look?
That's perfect. We've got the 5Ds up now. Over to
Brilliant.
you.
Okay, fabulous. So this might be a concept that some of you have heard of before. So if you have sort of any safeguarding or bystander experience, you may have heard of the 5Ds, but essentially they are a methodology that's been created by another organisation called Right to Be. And if you want to dig a bit deeper into what they're all about, then there is a link just on that front slide for you there. The active bystandership or this methodology isn't just limited to sport. It's something that you can utilise in any space, whether it's personal, professional, out and about, or anything like that. And essentially, they have been developed as a way to try and intervene safely in a situation, and they prioritise safety in order to de-escalate a situation, support your victims, and challenge that inappropriate behaviour. But it doesn't always necessarily require that direct confrontation. So they each stand for something that we can do as an active bystander, and any of them, as I mentioned, can be used in a situation no matter where you are. They aren't in an order of priority. So as I say, some of them will talk around and you might think, oh, this is something that I would naturally do anyway. It feels more natural to my sort of personality. But, and as I say, they might always be used on their own as well. You might use a couple of these in combination. But essentially, the first one we're going to look at is called distract. So this is an indirect response, and it's a really great way to try and diffuse or de-escalate a situation. The photo that we've got here, just on the right-hand side, it's of a situation where there was a gentleman on a train, and he was observing another guy that was being quite intimidating towards a female passenger, standing very close to her and staring at her quite uncomfortably. And he basically, in order to try and intervene in the situation, he took his backpack off in a really exaggerated way, and it meant that the other guy had to sort of move his position, and the guy that was being the active bystander was unable to stand in between the other gentleman and the lady. He made eye contact with the lady and just said, you know, do you mind if I stand here? And she said yeah, and sort of thanked him for his help. That intervention then caused the guy that was being intimidated in the first place to sort of move away, and he eventually moved on and moved out of the situation. So this was obviously, like I said, as a really indirect response. He didn't directly go up to the person and ask them or confront them. So essentially what it's looking to do is drawing that attention away from the harasser or the person that's being harassed, and it disrupts or distracts that behaviour. He could have gone up to the lady and asked her, you know, have you got the time? Do you know what the next stop is on the train? Or, you know, just doing something, like, as I say, that just disrupts that harassment. In a sporting context, you could look at it and think of a scenario where you know, if it's a coach that's being shouted, you could just say, oh, excuse me, coach, would you mind just coming over here a minute? Asking for them support. If it's, you know, person on the sideline, it could be just, oh, did you see the match the other day? And again, yeah, you're just distracting that behavior, just disrupting and having that interaction, but in an indirect response.
Sorry to interrupt, Heidi. The slide hasn't moved on for us, and someone else is saying in the chat they haven't had it move on either. So I'm not sure. We've still got the 5Ds of active bystandership coming up, so I'm not sure why that hasn't changed. You may need to put it in presenter mode.
Okay.
The other option is I share it again, and then I just click next slide every time. If that's
Can you
easier.
see it now?
No, it's not changing for some reason.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Share again. I tell you what, Callum, do you just want to do it?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, if that's easier, because it seemed to work on my one.
It was working with you, yeah. So let me just stop sharing again.
Right, can you see the 5D slide now?
Yep.
Perfect.
So if you just move on to distract.
So,
and if you just click through, it'll just bring up the top ones. That's it. So yeah, if you just pause there just for a moment. So just again illustrating what this one is all about. So we're distracting that behaviour, starting a conversation with the person that's being targeted, or the harasser, or the person showing poor practice. And the image there on the right is, as I mentioned, of the gentleman that was doing that intervention on the train. But it could be, as I said, it could be asking someone for help with something. You're essentially drawing attention away from the person that's being targeted, disrupting that harassment and that poor practice. Okay, next slide, please. And if you just click through this one. So on this one, we're talking around delegation. So in the Slido questions that we did at the beginning, some of the reasons or the barriers for stopping people from intervention is that they, you know, feel unsafe to be able to do it by themselves. So when you don't want to be able to respond to a situation alone, getting someone else involved means that you're more likely to take action. And again, we saw it in the video where once one person started getting involved, it encouraged other people too. So it broke that bystander effect, you know, as we mentioned, that diffusion of responsibility. So it could be that you're on the sideline and you hear some inappropriate behaviour, you know, turn to the person next to you and just reaffirm something like, oh, did you hear the way that that person's speaking about that female player? I don't like the remarks that are being said. And then, you know, if they were to repeat it back to you and you'd be like, you know, I didn't like that as well. So collectively, you might feel that you're encouraged to approach the person that's being targeted or the harasser together. So you've got that allyship together. Or it could be that you're delegating the responsibility by reporting it. So finding someone in authority. So if you're out in public, it could be you know, someone in authority like a police officer or a security guard, or if it's someone within your club environment, your club welfare officer, match official, head coach, or someone from the committee. This is also a really good way to kind of test out what your club does have in terms of their reporting channels. So does every club know how you would go about reporting an incident or a concern? Do you have a whistleblowing policy? Is there a way that people can report something anonymously if they wanted to? And have clubs got code of conducts? So this is, yeah, if this isn't anything at all, it's somewhere for you to kind of like just think to yourself, what are our reporting mechanisms and do our members know what they are? Next slide, please. And if anyone has got any questions or comments and they want to ask me a question about any of these whilst we're talking through them, yeah, just feel free to pop your hand up and we can have a conversation around them as well. So the next one is direct, clues in the name here. So this is speaking to the person, and this isn't necessarily approaching the harasser or the person that's being harassed. So it's not directly speaking necessarily to the person that's being disrespectful. It might be intervening with the person who's being targeted. But what I would say is to be assertive, not aggressive, because if you've got somebody that's not ashamed to be, you know, using language that you don't feel that's inappropriate or behaving in a way that you know don't deem acceptable, then the chances are if you're confronting them, they're probably not going to sit down and have a conversation with you in a sort of resolute manner. The chances are that it might, you know, escalate the situation. That's why it's a good idea to be assertive and not aggressive. Don't focus on fixing the person. Think about what it is that they're saying. So addressing their behaviour. For example, you could use something like, I don't like what you're saying, please stop. I don't like how you're behaving, please stop, rather than just saying, oi, what you're saying is racist, you know, because then you're essentially calling that person a racist. And as we're saying, you know, that would then potentially escalate the situation. In the video, the image here we've got on the screen. So this is taken from a situation in a Starbucks coffee shop. The staff in the Starbucks were aware of a man trying to talk to a young woman. She was working away on her laptop and they went over to her and gave her a hot chocolate with this message written on the side here. They pretended that it was a spare hot chocolate in a way to be able to approach her, sort of in an indirect way, I suppose. But as you can see, it did just ask if they were okay and if they needed or she needed them to help and support. So they weren't directly approaching the person that was being disrespectful. They were approaching the person that looked like they, you know, needed that extra support. And she went over to them and, you know, said, thank you so much. Appreciate you obviously keeping an eye out for us, but we can handle this guy. And I think she reported me to sort of sent this details to her mum and they shared it on social media because she was really appreciative of the situation that had happened. So yeah, so I guess one thing to just reaffirm there is if you are speaking to the person that's being disrespectful, is that assertiveness, not that aggression. Is there anything in the chat that we need to look at, or are we all good? Excellent, cool. If you want to carry on to the next one then please, Callum. So D number 4, this is your delay intervention. So if you haven't been able to act in the moment, this can still be a really powerful way to support the person that's being targeted. It's a really crucial way when immediate interventions such as your direct, distract or delegate potentially too dangerous or it's not possible for you to do at the time. But it is still showing that you're still having that meaningful intervention. So checking in with the person after you've witnessed what's happened, letting them know what you've seen and what you've heard, that wasn't right, and the behaviour wasn't acceptable. So you're really supporting them in an empathetic way, letting them know what you thought about the incident as well. If you've captured anything on video or anything on camera, which will come on to the next one as well, but having that sort of evidence as well could could be really crucial if you were looking to report this. But it is more about that sort of like supportiveness after the event that's happened, because if it has been a particularly nasty situation, they could be quite shocked, quite shook up. So it might just obviously take them some time. So checking in with them afterwards, and maybe delegating to someone else as well to get them that extra support if there is somebody that, you know, in authority that you need to also involve afterwards. And next one, please, Callum. And finally, so this is the 50, but I would probably say this wouldn't really be done as a standalone. I feel like it sits quite alongside a few of the other Ds, sort of like your delegate, your delay, and your distract. So essentially what you're looking to do is you're looking to try and capture as much information about what's happened as you can, because you don't know when or how that information may be needed. The video, the image here on the right hand side is of the murder of George Floyd in May 2020. There were so many active bystanders there that day, videoing things, taking photographs, that whilst they didn't directly intervene, the evidence that was gathered as part of the process really helped support in terms of that conviction when it came to convicting that police officer involved. It goes without saying, I think, as well, that if you are doing this, make sure that you're letting the person know, if you can, that you've got this information, giving them the option if they want to take it further. And please don't share these images online or on social media beforehand. It's so often that you go onto your local Facebook group for your town or wherever you are, someone's taken an image of something that they've seen that they don't agree with, and it's gone straight on social media, and then you've got all those keyboard warriors jumping on the bandwagon, and yeah, and it then almost becomes, you know, it grows legs, doesn't it? And these things don't always then reach a resolution. No one's a winner in that situation. So if you are doing this, then do it in a way that you're sympathetic to the person who's obviously, you know, if you're capturing that information to support them. Brilliant. If you want to move on to the next one. So yeah, just to remember, your 5 Ds, so distract, delegate, direct, delay, and document. Using these principles, as I say, together if you need to, a combination of a few of those, and you might naturally lean towards some of them than others. By increasing your exposure and applying these in your everyday situations, you know, it really hopefully will help to go towards stamping out that unacceptable behaviour, because we know, like we're saying, if things go left unchallenged, then that only perpetuates that behaviour. It's basically what we say is around the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So if you are choosing to turn a blind eye for whatever reason, then, you know, it's almost like you are kind of condoning that behaviour as well. So if there is a way that you can try and intervene safely, as we do say, because at the end of the day, we don't want multiple casualties. If you're there to support someone, you need to make sure that you are able to support them. But if one of these 5 Ds is helpful to you in intervention in the future, then that'd be a great takeaway from today. Moving on. Has anybody got any questions before we just move on to look at just another quick selection of methods? Any questions? Just clarification around anything that I've just mentioned? Street angels, yeah, we had that in a conversation that it was something that was a conversation that I had recently around, yeah, they are people. They're not like your CPS community support officers, are they? They sort of work, I don't know who they work for in terms of whether it's a charity or.
They're linked with, I think, the local church, one of the local churches. I met them in the Baptist church in Windsor on Saturday night, but they're all volunteers from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And
it's just
and I went
having
from
that
a DA point of view, but yeah, obviously they can intervene in loads of different things, and like you were kind of saying, their role isn't really to, you know, kind of, I guess, address it as such, but they would phone the local police. So if they thought something was untoward and they were kind of being told, no, go away, everything's fine, actually they could radio the local police, who could then maybe intervene around the corner, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, so it's like that delegation, isn't it, of intervention, but also them being there on the street, having that extra pair of eyes, that extra layer of security and safety for, you know, young people, young women, young men out there. It's really
and
great.
They've got kind of little things they can give out, like flip-flops or lollipops, so they can kind of have that first little kind of way in, I guess, as well.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Sophie. So I'm just going to move on to a selection of methods that form a spectrum of responses that are also designed to help address harm, and they're also tools for turning difficult conversations into productive ones. So it's called calling out, calling in, calling on. I imagine most of us have probably heard of the term calling out. As I mentioned, social media is rife with calling out culture. It's when you've considered somebody's done something that we consider wrong and it needs to be called out. However, like with your direct response, it's unlikely that this is going to lead to civil resolution or a conversation. It's potentially going to escalate that behaviour further. It's unlikely to change the person's mindset, but it does still, however, mean that that behaviour isn't left unchallenged. So when we're looking at that bystander effect, we know that if one person intervenes, then it's likely that others will feel empowered to do so. And when you think about the wider impact of someone's behaviour, whether you've got young children or other people around you, if you're calling it out and it is stopping it in that particular moment in time, it might encourage other people to do that in the future as well. Typically, calling out would probably be used in a situation where you don't know the harasser, so such as street harassment, for example. We want to stop that behaviour there and then for the safety and the well-being of the person being targeted, and it's potentially unlikely that you'll probably see them again. So yeah, calling out within sort of that sexual harassment, street harassment situation. I would again still go with the phrase, I don't like what you said, please stop. I don't like how you're acting, please stop, because again, that's coming from your perspective and it's harder to argue with that than as opposed to you calling someone a particular term that they would then potentially go on to disagree with. Okay, Callum, next slide, please. So calling in, how can we change the narrative, this calling out culture? So calling in is like a calling out, but it's done with a lot more empathy, a lot more respect. So if we see someone has done something or said something wrong, rather than reacting with that anger, we're responding with curiosity. So curious questioning, we're inviting people in for a conversation rather than inviting someone to defend their position. And it builds on that be curious, not judgmental approach, which can be a really effective way to try and diffuse the situation. In some of our training, we show a video from Ted Lasso. So I don't know if there are any Ted Lasso fans out there, but there is one episode where he's playing darts and there's quite a funny scenario based on the fact, someone just makes assumptions of him without really getting to understand the situation. So as we say, be curious, not judgmental. And this, again, could be in a situation where you're in a sporting environment or at work and someone might make a sexist joke. You're directly calling them in to explain what it is that they're saying. So, I don't think that was funny. Can you explain to me what it was meant when you said that? I use this, I've got two small children that are, growing up in a world of social media and they're learning and they're absorbing so much information from multiple places, friends, school, social media, as I say, and sometimes they do say things that they've heard that they might not fully understand. So I do find myself using this term probably quite a lot more just by inviting them in for that conversation to understand what it is that they've said, and then, potentially allow me to help them offer a different perspective on it. So to kind of put it in a bit of a nutshell, calling in is more likely to be used when you're using, when you know that person and you've got an existing relationship, and that will continue afterwards. Next slide, please, Callum. And yeah, calling on. So this is an even gentler approach, and it's more of an intermediate step to promoting that better behaviour, but without that intense confrontation. I can share a link to a really good TED talk from an American activist called Loretta Ross, who talks around this. She articulates it in a really, really great way. But we're just looking at this to use in a situation where we're more likely to have a long-term relationship with the harasser. So it could be potentially a friend, a parent, or someone that we've known for a long time. And we're using our relationship to help them see the impact of their behaviour, but in a non-aggressive, non-threatening way. Again, building on that curious, not judgmental approach. So take, for example, a situation I find myself in quite often. I really have enjoyed following the Lionesses' success and, you know, being European champions twice, but still find ourselves in situations where the comments are made about their ability, and you can't help but get the sense of feeling that their successes are seen as not as important as the men's team, for example. Put yourself in a family situation where you've got older family members and there might be comments that are made, and as I say, being mindful of the perception this has given my younger children. I wouldn't want this behaviour to go left unchallenged, because obviously, as we say, if it does, it normalises behaviour and then reaffirms those beliefs that this is the case. You know, for this example, women's successes are being perceived as less important. So looking to reframe that response back to the person could be something like, you know, Uncle Dave, for example. I know you're a great advocate of sports. You're someone who enjoys watching, participating. You're a father of now grown women. I know that you are supportive of women's participation in sport, but sometimes your comments just now might be perceived differently, especially by those a lot younger that are around you and could be more influential by what you're saying. And you can guarantee that their response will be like, well, I didn't intend it to come across that way. But then you know, it's thinking about that wider impact, so the intent as opposed to the impact that it's having, and you know, just reframing it in that way. So using your relationship to help change and get somebody to reflect on their behaviour, which hopefully, you know, is a lot softer way to do it, and can work. Next slide, please, Callum. Okay, so there are our toolkit, if you like. So your 5Ds, and then the 3 methodologies there of calling out, calling in, calling on. Before we go into our scenarios to discuss this a little bit more detail, has anyone got any questions around any of those? As I say, any more clarification around that? Or have I all blown your minds completely? No. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to pause for a breath now, and I'm going to pass you back to Callum. So we're going to just look at some scenarios and reflecting on what I've just been talking around in terms of those tools that we can use. We're going to watch these scenarios and then invite you into offer what you think you could use, whether it's the 5Ds, etc., to maybe intervene in these situations going forward.
Perfect, thank you, Heidi. Yes. So as Heidi said, just watch the video and have a think about how you might deal with the situation, and then we'll speak about that on the next slide.
How much abuse do you have to put up with each week? You know, people shouting at you. Get out there and do it! Having a pop. You ain't got no commitment, son! Swearing and that. I am bloody sick of it! What, none? You ain't showing pride? That's because you wouldn't put up with it, would you? You let yourself down? I mean, people like you and me, we wouldn't stand for it, would we? You let the team down? But then... you let me down? We're not kids, are we? This is the last time! The last time! Look at me! Did you know? You don't want it enough! Over half our young footballers. Now you get out there and you fight for the ball! Have to put up with pressure. Go on, make me proud! And abuse. You ain't got nothing, son! From their elders. Why don't you just grow up? And betters. And it's time we gave it a rest. Open your eyes! My old woman can remember his campaign! Listen to this muppet. Every week he does this, screaming and shouting at the ref. Ref! Ref! That's a yellow card, ref! Card him! Yellow card him, yellow card! How are these kids supposed to learn the game if you don't know the game? He's an animal! Give him Look at him, the ref. But he gives up his Saturday mornings to do this. Now, was it the right decision? It might have been, it might not have been. Who knows? We all make mistakes. You mug! Would you take this at work? Nah.
Okay, thank you.
No, don't thank me, thank you!
Just clear the playing area, please.
You ain't got a clue!
All right.
Clown! You see, Dad's trying to live out his own dreams through his son. Did it? What's the matter with you? That's a suicidal boy! How's he supposed to learn? Rosie! if he can't make his own mistakes. Referee, you're not watching the game, mate. You're watching me. You ain't going to see nothing here. It's no wonder we're losing so many refs when we're having to put up with people like Jet the Biscuit here every week. Come on, Stevie! You're running about like a chicken with no eggs. Liven it up! And it's no wonder thousands of kids give up the game either. If we carry on like this, we won't have a game left. Ref! Ref? Some of us need to take a long, hard look at ourselves.
So, as the video shows, you can see some sort of, not very applicable behavior going on there. And what we would ask from you is if you feel comfortable to unmute yourself and maybe give an answer of what you might do in that situation with that particular individual shouting on the sidelines. If you don't feel comfortable, maybe pop it in the chat. Heidi, I can't see the chat now because I'm in presenter mode, so would you mind just keeping an eye on it for me? And if anyone does have any thoughts on how they might intervene, please do say so now. Anyone feeling brave? Remember back to the video of being the first person, normally somebody follows on.
I mean, I'll add a couple of comments maybe.
Yeah, you're
and
welcome to.
It might get the
or
conversation
I could, whatever
going.
you prefer, Heidi.
I think the direct approach probably would not help in this situation. He's clearly very, very aggressive, and as much as I like Ray, I don't like this Ray. I feel like definitely delay to the ref afterwards. Making sure that you checking in with him afterwards. He doesn't deserve to be spoken to like that. Most referees are volunteers. Some of them can be as young as 14 because that's when you can, start doing your reffing qualification. So I don't think parents see that as well. Sometimes they just see the armband or the outfit. They don't see the child and forget that, this is grassroots football.
Perfect.
Thank
Anybody
you very
else
much, Heidi? Want to add anything else?
I was going to say, I think I probably would be direct, especially if he was stood right next to me. I would perhaps say, sorry, I've got my mic off, haven't I?
Yes, you have.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah. I think if he was stood next to me, I would just, I probably would do, I would like distract and then be direct. Distract to get his attention, and would probably say, and try and diffuse in by saying, I can tell you're so passionate about this, but perhaps, let them just do their job. Let's give them a chance and just try and just break the conversation and just try and bring it down a little bit as well, maybe in a calm way, and see if I can just break the thread of thought and what he's verbalizing. So perhaps that would be the way I would approach it.
Perfect, thank you, and that's an excellent point you make about recognizing their passion and understanding that although it's poor behavior, it may well come from a good place, that they want to see the team do well or they want to see the players do well. And I think that's a really good point. And also they mention an interesting point in the video that from a sort of youth development, sport athlete development relationship, some clubs and coaches don't give instructions on the sidelines because they want kids and young players to learn the craft of the game themselves, without having someone telling them what to do all the time. And as we all know, some of the best lessons come from mistakes. So I think what you said there about picking up on the passion and everything was a really, really good point. And yeah, definitely, I think there's lots of different approaches you can take. So thank you very much, Angela, for contributing to that.
I think I would think delegation. There were other people on the sidelines, weren't there? I think I'd try and involve other people in in supporting me in distracting the angry parent.
Yeah, perfect. That's a great comment. So you know,
There were quite a
sometimes
few
safety in
people
numbers.
around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safety in numbers is definitely, you could say to someone, you know, this isn't right. Shall we go together and distract them, or you know, do something together, so you're not on your own, and as you say, putting yourself in that uncomfortable or potentially dangerous situation. So yeah, calling on someone else, absolutely fantastic answer. Perfect. Thank you very much. If there's anyone else, please do feel free to chip in.
I think I'd also be documenting it as well, because I feel this needs to be raised as a code of conduct, because the club should have something about parental behaviour at a match. So I think this probably goes above and beyond anything that is written in your code. So using that as your tool as well to try and stop them from doing it again, and I guess giving them the sort of red card, if you like, if they do it again.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good point, because then if it comes up again, there's proof that it happened. Fantastic. I think we've covered that one quite well. So thank you everyone for contributing. We've got one more scenario to go through, which Heidi will take you through now. So it's up on the screen there.
So yeah, scenario 2, this isn't a video, this is just more of a theoretical situation. We've got a grassroots rugby club, and we've got an under-12 player who said to a teammate that another player shouldn't be playing anymore, and that someone should tell his mum or parent that he isn't good enough and they shouldn't waste their time and money going to training. The children have also created a WhatsApp group to discuss who is the best player and talk about the game, and a particular game where they lost because this particular under-12 player, the one who's saying these things, wasn't playing. So essentially saying that if he'd have been there, they'd have won because he's the best player. As a bystander, so what would you do as an intervention in this? And I suppose you could position it from yourself as another parent, a coach, or someone that's also a member of the club. You might have come across this scenario as well in your own club environments. I've recognised it could be quite a common one. So yeah, please feel free to raise any interventions that you would do.
I think I would go and speak to the club welfare officer, because I thought under 12s were not supposed to be on WhatsApp.
Yeah, exactly right. So in theory, under over 13s is the age limit for WhatsApp, or has it gone up to 15 now? I'm looking at you, Sarah.
I think it's under 13, but I did actually read on LinkedIn today that WhatsApp are actually looking at creating an under 13 thing for parents to be able to manage the child's account, but it would still be encrypted. So although they would be able to know who that they're adding into their group chats, they still wouldn't be able to view the chat itself. So yeah, that's a whole new thing, especially in the moment where they're talking about banning all social media for under 16. So yeah, I think that's an education thing, that even though we can't control outside of the club what these players and parents are allowing, that actually as a rule within the club, that we don't support children under 13 being on social media. We wouldn't allow them to follow the club on socials. We wouldn't invite them to join any social medias and stuff like that. So I think we need to be setting an example on social media as a club for a start, and also set out that have a policy that you use when you do your code of conduct at the beginning of the season, and follow it up throughout the year with days like Internet Safety Day and stuff, that you have an acceptable use policy around the internet and social media within the club. So it might be that you don't necessarily want to call this behaviour out directly, depending on whether you can prove it or not, because it might all be quite hearsay.
but you could then follow that up a week after the complaint with a blanket session on acceptable behaviour on WhatsApp and stuff like that, and even make it an even wider conversation about respect for each other. It doesn't even have to be specific to them talking about what's on WhatsApp, but it might be that you talk about what's online actually can follow you into your adulthood. I think maybe under 12s that might not be as good, but maybe if you had sort of teenagers that actually, when they're starting to think about getting jobs and everything, you can relate it to their digital footprint, that actually, that might be a conversation.
Yeah, that's absolutely nail on the head there, Sarah. So also Harriet has put in the comments about going to the welfare officer at the club as well, go to the parent whose child made the account, probably try and get the under 12 team together to discuss working as a team and supporting each other. Exactly, that's it, because at the end of the day, the culture here sounds like that for them success is winning. Certainly, the narrative here that's being told that you're no good, so you shouldn't be playing, as opposed to the fact that they're there as a team. Physical activity is so important for young people, for their mental health as well as their physical health. So whether or not you're the best player in the team should be irrelevant. Being together as a team isn't always about winning as well. We have to be humble in defeat, I think. So recognizing, like I said, is success isn't always about winning, but it's about coming together and supporting one another. Yeah, thank you so much. Has anyone else got a comment? We're going to just move on to the outcomes, which will just reflect on what we've just been talking about. I think we've more or less covered them all, but unless anyone else wants one last go before we...
So Andrea's just mentioned, as it's sort of following on from that digital footstep now, that footprint, that a lot of firms, when they're employing people, are actually using agencies to check people's online background and history to see what sort of person they are. So it is it can have a real detriment to someone going forward.
Callum, do you want to move on to the next slide and we can just reflect on the actual suggestive outcomes? Yeah, so suggested responses. I think, we've all mentioned about talking to the under 12 team as a group to address what the expectations are, and that reflecting on that code of conduct as well. Talking to the individual under 12 player, if they ever heard them discussing, why is it they feel that way? Is there other things going on that, that they feel that they want to be creating this sort of negative culture within their club, within their team? Re-education around the WhatsApp group again, the expectation around what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable on social media. The follow-ups that's needed. So I think there's education for parents and children here. It's not always left at the children's left down to the children to be the ones that need the education. Parents, I think, can learn a huge amount. The world of AI, social media, everything is vastly changing rapidly. It's really hard to keep up. So education all the time, I don't think is a bad thing. Again, talking about that teamwork, making sure that that working together as a team is a big success. It's not always about the winning, sorry. And create those team values, code of conduct. So you can do this as your team as well. So rather than the committee, sort of the adults creating those values, how often do we get the kids involved, the younger teams, well, to create what is important to them, and get them to kind of like really reflect on those values to put in their own kind of code of conducts as well. Okay, brilliant. So just to summarise what we've mentioned around the 5 Ds, I can't remember if there's a slide coming up that just summarises that, Callum, so I will just mention that. You've got your 5 Ds, you've got your be curious, not judgmental, that calling out, calling in, calling on, and just going back to those 2 scenarios as well. I think, I'm sure I didn't catch your name, that reflected on the under 12s one, that calling in. We want to get those people on side, rather than sort of directly calling them out, kind of bring them in, help to change the narrative, but more in that empathetic way. So if you were to take one key take home this evening, having listened to Callum and I talk for the last hour and a bit, it'd be really great to hear one key take home from anyone that wants to come off mute if you're feeling brave, or pop it in the chat as well. We'd love to hear that.
So I came from a domestic abuse point of view, and a colleague of mine came, I think, last week for the sexual harassment. So and I kind of came because when we did a needs assessment, it was talking about introducing kind of bystander training around domestic abuse. So I just kind of wanted to see, yeah, how this could relate, or kind of look at something like this delivery. So whether or not I kind of follow up with you separately, I don't know if there's some work we could do together, or kind of other thoughts really.
Yeah,
it's definitely been useful, and I can definitely relate it all to what we're, I think, trying to achieve. So
yeah, I mean, as we said, active bystandership, it can be framed in so many different scenarios. We've got colleagues around our network that kind of deliver it from an anti-racism perspective, from support of the LGBTQI plus community perspective. So yeah, like I said, it cuts across everything, doesn't it? But I think at the end of the day, the message is that intervention is better than not intervention. So if there is something work we can do, then yeah, more than happy to explore that.
I definitely like the 5 Ds. That is good.
And do you recognise any of those sort of interventions that you do naturally anyway? And have any of them given you a bit more sort of courage to do something differently?
I definitely ask, are you okay? The direct question, basically, are you feeling okay? And how can I make it different for you? So definitely going a bit more on to the 5 Ds, definitely.
Yeah, brilliant. Just looking in the comments, so someone's put be brave and confident to call out. Absolutely. As we said, I think a lot of the barriers to start with were around that sort of safety and element and not knowing what to do. So having just reflected on the 5 Ds and that toolkit, now hopefully there's something there, like we've just said, that you could see that you could do to help some intervention, because some intervention is better than none. Yeah, Claire's been assertive rather than aggressive. Absolutely. Talk about how that behaviour is affecting you rather than others, accusing them of something. Make sure you're safe first. Absolutely. As all with this, that caveat is there. If you intervene in a situation to help someone and then, your safety becomes an issue, then how is that helping that person? To think of your safety first and using those channels to call them out, or call them in, or call them on, whichever you feel. Yeah, 5 Ds, stepping in matters, absolutely. Yes, so the FA do have their own bystander training called Flag It. You're correct there. Oh, that was Hazel, Sarah, sorry. Yeah. Just highlighting that the FA have their own Flag It training, which kind of is a very football specific piece of bystander training. Rugby, so the RFU have something very similar as well, and I guess it just if they're delivering that to within their sporting environment, it just makes it a little bit more relatable. Obviously the sort of concepts that we're talking around today, we've made it more open for you to be able to relate to it in a situation, whether it's sport specific or in like your personal situation. Okay, brilliant.
Are you happy to move on, Heidi?
I think so, yeah. Oh, here we go. There is a summary slide. So yeah, just to remember the 5 Ds, distract, delegate, direct, delay, and document. Be curious, not judgmental. Go check out Ted Lasso if you haven't seen it, especially the episode with the darts. We can always share a link with that, with our sort of slides and recording, etc. And share these messages and learnings with your peers. And we're happy to support your clubs, support you if you feel that this bit of training would, land really well within your own club environment, and we can do this face to face or over Teams, as you've seen this evening. We can kind of tailor it as well to have more scenario specific examples. And next slide.
Perfect.
So yeah, and I think that almost wraps it up for us. So thank you so much for your engagement, sharing your experiences with us this evening. That nearly an hour and a half has whizzed by. We do have a feedback form here, so we'd really appreciate if you wouldn't mind scanning the QR codes and clicking on the link. This just helps to shape any further training and sessions that we run going forward, because we want to do stuff that's obviously of interest and specific to, you know, the needs that are out there from our local clubs across the counties. Our next session, which is in April, we're working with an organisation called Kineska Advocacy, and they're going to be hosting the session, and we're going to be focusing on that sort of red flag, green flag behaviours, so looking at lower level concerns and how this can create healthy sporting environments. But we have got more details on the registration link. If you want to join us on April the 15th, that will be great.